Hey MennoNerds, this is Deborah. I'm joining you from Edinburgh, Scotland, and today I'd like to continue the conversation we've been having about preachers, and I would like to suggest that there are some things preachers say which just are not helpful. I think we've all been there. We've all been through sermons where after it we thought, how does that apply to anything? How is that relevant? And where is this pastor coming from? And I think that it is a challenge, especially those of us who have been to seminary and who have studied theology. We definitely can relate. We oftentimes want to use our academics. We oftentimes want to draw on our classwork and our commentaries and our Greek and Hebrew. But we need to remember that the average person in our congregation has not been to seminary, does not read commentaries for fun, and does not know the biblical languages. And in the end of the day, the reason people go to church is because they're seeking a way to have a better society, become a better father or mother, have a better family life. And if it's not engaging, relevant, or interesting to them, it doesn't matter how good our sermon is, they're going to lose interest in the next 5 minutes. But I also want to suggest that there are certain topics that we sidestep because we live in the comfortable West and we don't want to admit that those problems happen where we live. For example, racism. Recently, I got into a discussion with a friend from Tyndale because they posted on Facebook a question: is there racism in the church? Now, I am of the belief that there is racism in every country, context, and church, but someone else who responded to her post thought otherwise, and he wrote to me, I'm not excusing the racism in Canada. I'm saying that what we have here isn't racism. It is of a different category compared to what racism really is. Calling what happens in Canada racism is like calling using my battery-powered phone spaceflight. They both happen in the air, but are vastly different endeavors. The difference here is Canada is one of category, not degree. It's not that we have racism light here in Canada. It's that we have something so different in practice than what they have elsewhere that you can't even call it racism compared to Mississippi or Sudan or the West Bank. Now, I think most of us would agree that this person is a little bit blind to the fact that there is racism and he doesn't want to admit it and he is being a little bit ignorant on this point. But I think that this actually happens quite frequently, especially with things like religious persecution and poverty. I've heard so many times pastors saying that poverty doesn't exist in Canada. They'll say, oh, well, we're such a rich country, even the poorest people in Canada are way better off than the poorest people in other places of the world. And I think, yeah, that's true. We do have a lot in the Western countries, but there is still poverty. And if we're going to blind ourselves to the fact that there's poverty, that's not going to help anyone. For example, over here in Scotland, well, Scotland's a developed country, quite rich, but when I walk to the city centre, which is only about 25-30 minutes away, I pass by 20 homeless people at least. Now, I could close my eyes to them and say, they probably brought themselves to this place, and there's probably something wrong with them, because in Scotland, the poorest people are still richer than in Zimbabwe. I could say stuff like that, or I could actually take a moment and think, how can I help these 20 homeless people that I'm walking past? How can I brighten their day? I could take a moment and think about the single mother in my church who has 3 kids who can't afford to feed them. I could think about the college student who can't afford his rent. Or I could just pass it off because apparently we're richer than the rest of the world. Same with religious persecution. We often think, well, I would never be killed in Canada, so I have no idea what it's like to be religiously persecuted. Now, it's true, there's many countries in the world that face a harder plight than what we face, but at the same time, I also have friends who have converted to Christianity from other religions and their family has completely shunned them. So do I just ignore what they're going through? Or do I realize that yes, persecution does happen even in the West? So that's my challenge to you. Happy to engage with you guys and talk to you later.